Insurance isn't one size fits all, and shopping for it shouldn't feel like squeezing into something that just doesn't fit. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they show you options that fit your budget. Enough hunting for discounts, trying to calculate rates, and tinkering with coverages. Maybe you're picking out your very first policy, or maybe you're just looking for something that works better for you and your family. Either way, they make it simple to see your options. No guesswork, no surprises. Ready to see how easy and fun shopping for car insurance can be? Visit progressive.com and give the Name Your Price tool a try. Take the stress out of shopping and find coverage that fits your life on your terms. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
What does it look like to build something you believe in so much that you keep going even when the runway is measured in weeks and not months?
This week, we're talking to Olivia Messer, journalist, novelist, and editor-in-chief of The Barbed Wire, an independent Texas newsroom she's been holding together with investigative reporting, pet portraits, and a level of radical transparency that's made at least one of your hosts cry. Mike, I don't feel like that's much of a mystery.
I could cry silently. They don't know.
It's true. That's true.
We get into what it actually costs to run a newsroom that nobody's paying for yet, why virality and revenue have essentially no relationship to each other, and what happens to your creativity when every single day is a budget meeting.
The creative economy is broken, but some people are still making it work. We're here to find out how. I'm Anna Marie Cox.
And I'm Open Mike Eagle. And this is Past Due.
Olivia Messer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Olivia is a journalist, novelist, and editor-in-chief of The Barbed Wire, who spent a decade investigating the sexual harassment in the Texas legislature before building her own independent news outlet. I am so glad you could join us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Is it on me? I think it's on me.
Well, I'll do it.
All right. You're always willing. I love it.
Do it.
We started out so shy.
You've brought me along, and now I'm ready every
Okay.
time.
All right.
And I've had to grow into asking this question a little bit because it feels very personal to people I don't know. But we do start every conversation with a very direct question, and it is: when is the last time you were worried about covering your monthly expenses?
This month.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll be honest. Being the editor-in-chief of a independent startup newsroom in 2026, still a little precarious. So so that's where we're at.
And I'm going to ask a follow-up, which is, when's the last time you worried about covering your newsroom expenses?
Oh, always, permanently, continuously. There was a time where I was a little less involved in knowing what was going on the business side, and I lived in a little bit of a state of naivete, and at that point I wasn't as worried. That was maybe the first 6 months, but then once I, why haven't we paid this invoice yet? Once you start asking questions like that, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly what the situation is. So,
Mike, go.
Well, if I'm reading correctly, you left the Daily Beast to start the Barbed Wire, and I don't know much about how your industry works, but it sounds like you left a stable position to start a risky startup.
I can see why you would think that, but I actually left like mid-COVID. Had some like personal crises happen, went to stay with my parents in their guest room. A family friend died, and I like hit a burnout wall really, really quickly at the Daily Beast. And at the time, I was so used to doing the treadmill of like trending news coverage, especially during the height of COVID, that I was publishing like one 3,000 to 4,000 word story that was originally reported a day.
Wow.
And I like slammed into the wall basically, and I quit, and then was trying to freelance for the first time, which was impossible. I had a couple of, you're always having to pick between like, do I actually want a paycheck or do I want this name recognition outlet? And then eventually the people who started the Barbed Wire asked me to consult on what it would be like to create a digital progressive media property. And I was like, a steady paycheck, that sounds awesome. And so it was actually the inverse. But also around the same time all of that happened, the Daily Beast changed ownership, laid off all but 2 of the people that I had worked with the whole time I was there. So I probably would have been looking for work anyway.
I mean, I kind of laughed at that question because I think the truth of the matter is, in our business in this day and age, there is no non-precarious employment.
Yes.
In fact, I know of one. I was at a cocktail party for Texas Highways Magazine, the official magazine of the Texas Department of Transportation.
Wow. Is it a physical magazine?
It is a physical magazine.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you get a job there, like, you're kind of set. Yeah. Like, that magazine is not shutting down.
When I was recruiting for the Barbed Wire, I tried to poach from every single Texas newsroom. Yeah. And that gave me a really, really nice window into that stability. Like, Texas Highways, folks there were like, I'm not even taking your call. I have a great gig.
They have pensions. They have pensions at Texas Highways.
It's incredible. And that, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I still interact with journalists who work at legacy outlets and have only worked at legacy outlets. And I'm still struck by the belief that folks like that kind of carry in their brains of, well, all the good journalists are employed right now, which is just that's not real. And it must be really nice to live in that version of reality. But most of us are having to like beg and scrape and then, you know, how many different jobs can I do at this one job? How many other responsibilities? How indispensable can I make myself so that I am impervious? And even then, Kara, who's our managing editor at the Barbed Wire, she was at the Washington Post for years. She was at USA Today for years. She's like one of the best investigative reporters and journalists I've ever worked with. And, you know, now that when I meet folks like that and I see that they've also survived multiple layoffs, I was just talking to Ross, who's the editor-in-chief of Texas Monthly. We were talking about the times he survived layoffs, and, you know, the politics editor there, Ben, was telling me about the times he survived layoffs. And, you know, people don't always post about it. So some of the time you don't know unless people are sharing willingly.
Well, just, sorry, a little sidebar here.
Mm-hmm.
Can somebody explain to me why Texas highways are so safe from why is it so stable? How come it's impervious to some of these forces we're talking about?
They don't depend on readership or advertising.
So what do they depend on?
It's funded by the Texas Department of Transportation.
Oh, it's just part of their budget every
it is what I mean, I guess conceivably it could get cut, but it's kind of it's a tourist publication.
Yeah, it's also true, I think, in general, that trade publications are a little safer because like one of the things I quickly learned when I was freelancing for the first time is that like writing for the Amex magazine or whatever pays better, pays on time, and they like will find you assignments, whereas writing for something like Rolling Stone, you have to bring them a great pitch already. And then, you know, there are a lot of outlets where I'm lucky to have a literary agent that I'm like, you should step in here because I know I'm not going to negotiate a very good deal for myself. And even then we're talking about like the difference between $500 and $550. And, you know, but he earns every penny. I'm terrible at negotiating. You know, I'm not a white man. I just like don't have that in me.
And people lie about how much they can pay you.
Yes. Well, there's so much stuff that I've learned for the first time as an editor. And one of them is just other editors will tell me things that when I was a reporter, I didn't know about, like how precarious every newsroom's runway actually is and how much they shield their reporters from that reality. I was just indignant and on the union. So I spent a lot of my time in newsrooms being righteous and indignant about like why my pay wasn't this and, you know, how I got left behind in this way. And almost every time that I ascribed malice or even negligence to it, it was just everything was falling and they were trying their best.
And I want to talk a little bit more about the politics and economics of newsrooms because I had a fascinating conversation with someone at what I thought was a well-established, relatively new publication. And I wonder about your response to this in terms of hiring, Olivia.
Mhm.
So this person was telling me about when they make hires and who they hire. And he said, we only hire people who we know will bring in enough revenue to cover that hire. Which means someone who has an existing platform, someone who has been demonstrated to have a large following or has done viral stories or, you know, has a podcast. Like it's to me, and this is why I'm curious about your hiring practice. I mean, I think you can probably understand like why they do that. Of course.
Yes, though it strikes me as very 2016. I worked at the Daily Beast. It was such an insane time to work there. And now looking back at it, my colleagues that I ordered lunch with and messed around with are Ben Collins, who runs The Onion, Olivia Newsy, who I'm not going to say any more about any of that.
We can talk about that offline.
Yeah. Erin Gloria Ryan, does Hysteria and is great. It's just Taylor Lorenz. Like every single person I sat near is now famous for some reason or another. And that was a very specific set of choices, of hiring choices that the Daily Beast was making. And I think a lot of national newsrooms do this. They sort of balance between who are the workhorses who do all of the work like in the trenches versus who are the sort of star name brand reporters. And often I think as one of the people who was a workhorse who like knew our Parsley login, knew how to edit the CMS, did a lot of trending news. If I wanted to do investigations for my first like 3 years, it had to be in my own time. Like I went on a reporting trip to San Antonio and I had to get up every morning at 4 a.m. and do our trending news coverage until noon. And then I was allowed to drive out and do interviews, even though I was on a reporting trip. And of course, around that time, like we were hiring people who were like rising stars and everything they tweeted was a news item. And those folks would get to do like the name brand interviews and, magazine covers. We were like not allowed to write for other outlets unless you had your own following and then you could kind of dictate your own rules. And honestly, I think that felt really unfair at the time. And I was so jealous, so just deep in my bones jealous all the time. And now I feel really lucky that I had to like prove myself through reporting for so long before I got an actual platform. I feel like that saved me from making mistakes that were, you have to make a certain number of mistakes earlier in your career. And it's better to do it when you don't have 3 million people following you, in my opinion.
My thought about that, and I wondered what your response would be to this angle on that approach, is you're not taking any risks for anything better. Like when you hire people who are proven in some way to bring in a certain amount of eyeballs or a certain amount of revenue, like, don't you miss? I mean, I guess I think you miss making hires that could do something outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, the Barbed Wire is so small.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to hire someone who is like an extremely messy file, and we have to pass things back and forth 8 or 9 times in order to get it to a position where we can run it. This is the sort of unsaid thing is that there are a lot of folks who are name brand, excellent on TV, and can't file a copy that's readable.
We won't name names, but I think you and I had a whole conversation about the people we've heard that about.
Well, yeah, and it's like, that thing of the first time you edit someone and you're like, oh, wow, this is what it looks like. But, folks on this small of a team have to be able to do everything. And they have to be able to do it well the first time around. Whereas I think bigger newsrooms you can kind of mix and match that way. But, I feel really grateful that someone like Brian Garr, he's a good writer, and also he has a solid Twitter following because he's a stand-up comic. I feel like everyone on our staff is kind of like had done TV reporting and also did some coaching work. And because of that, they have an Instagram following, but also they're just like an exceptional learner. This was the first time in my career that I was full-time editing, but having a reporter who goes in and looks at the changes you made so that they can optimize to self-edit better next time, I mean, that's incredible. And I would take that any day over someone who has like 300,000 Instagram followers, because they have a hot podcast or good takes or whatever it is.
On this week's bonus edition of Past Due, Olivia tells us about the student newspaper that accidentally stumbled into the best business model in journalism right now.
It involves a drinking game, Google Ads, and a super inappropriate question. It's funnier than it sounds and super dark. You can hear it now and help support the show at patreon.com/pastdue.
Did you have any reluctance or fear to take the reins of that position after being a writer for so long? Did you have ambitions of being an editor?
Yes, but I tried so hard to recruit for the position before I filled it. And of course, the joke internally is that I like Dick Cheney'd myself into the job, which every time I say in like a speech or an event, I have to explain what that means for the Gen Z folks in the room. It means I was recruiting for the job and then got it myself.
The Jeopardy guy did it too, if you want to change the reference.
Yes. You know what? Thank you. But some of the issue with that is that that means that I spent months hearing a lot of really good, compelling reasons not to take the job. It also, I had never been a full-time editor before. I wanted this project to exist. I thought it was important. I didn't have another full-time job. But I had a long call with Brian Sweeney, who used to be editor-in-chief of Texas Monthly and who's one of our advisors. And he explained the thing that now sounds really obvious, which is that almost nobody feels ready. And also there are a ton of people who've been hired as EICs who had not even reporting experience. In the history of like American media, it's almost always been like one kind of guy. And often they were like, really good at writing columns or really good at takes or really good at like being the figurehead. But the actual job of EIC is, it's impossible. Every single editor of mine I talked to and asked for advice were like, you'd be perfect for this. And also it's going to be terrible and it's going to be thankless and you shouldn't do it. And I mostly did because I really wanted this thing to exist. And I feel like I was so lucky to get this sort of cross training in my career of like, first I was at the Texas Observer. I did an investigation. I got to like do some trending news stuff. I went to the Waco Trib. They like really pounded like AP style local crime reporting in there, but it also gave me the opportunity to make some mistakes in the sort of local sphere that had emotional resonance, but weren't like super public, like getting someone's name wrong and then their mom calling you because her child died and you spelled his name wrong in the newspaper. You don't forget that kind of stuff. And then, of course, when I got to the Daily Beast, I had to unlearn everything I had learned and learn how to write with voice really quickly about literally anything. Like I remember one morning at 5 a.m. Googling Edward Snowden because I just didn't know anything about him and I had to write the article about it and I didn't know what I was doing. But all of that combined meant that I had to learn about SEO, had to learn about some of the, editing style stuff, had to figure out how to put voice in these things. And that trajectory, that ladder that I took from local to national outlet, there aren't enough local outlets to be populating the national pool with positions like that anymore. And those positions that are like primarily aggregation are not going to exist for much longer in my mind. And so the reps that I got to do are going to be a lot harder to, I don't know, even if like AI takes it over, how do you train journalists on that kind of stuff without that job needing to be done?
I want to interrupt really quick to say how grateful I am to have you on because we've done a long stretch without journalists. And I thought when we were doing this show that it was going to be like journalist after journalist after journalist, because it was going to be like the people whose industry I was particularly worried about. But I'm curious, like maybe Mike can kind of, with him being in LA, he can maybe tell us about what the parallels are, because my observation on what Olivia is describing is that she might be the last of the generation to have that kind of come up through the reps, come up through doing local, doing kind of everything behind the scenes, not necessarily in not being a one-man band. Actually, I want to make that distinction. Like, you can do everything, but you were in newsrooms.
Yeah.
Which is different than being the vertical camera, short form, doing clips for YouTube or for Instagram, and being that kind of one-man band or one-woman band. Excuse me. One-person band. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of parallels in the entertainment industry, Mike, like between how people now come up if they don't have that utility player and teamwork background.
The quickest analogy that came to me is just in music. And since people have the opportunity now to become very famous from their homes or their local environment, a lot of people, and they have the ability to record and put out high quality music from their homes too. A lot of people become very popular before they ever do a show. So there's a class of musicians now who cannot perform. And so, they later have to figure out how to do that part, which is usually the part that happens on the front end. They end up having to figure out how to do that on the back end if they ever figure it out at all.
That I may be wrong about this, but I think Bo Burnham has talked about how, because he first became famous as like a kid on YouTube making music, then when he started doing actual shows, there was like, oh, I actually have terrible stage fright and like debilitating anxiety. And he has talked about how he stepped back for a few years and then he was planning to go back out in 2020. And he had gotten so excited about figuring out how to do that. But what I also like about that example is that then he created Inside, which I think is like the best piece of art that anyone made about the pandemic or during the pandemic years. And it didn't really strike me until I was talking about it just now that that's also the best thing I think he's done. Because it went back to, I'm stuck in a room by myself and I just have to make art that I just edit, control, write. And then my favorite thing about that is the extended edition is terrible songs. Like, one song is just about peanut butter sandwiches and it's awful. And I really appreciated that he released it because I had been thinking, wow, I don't know how he did this. And then I'm looking at all the deleted songs and I'm like, I'm so glad he cut these. You know what? Like, actually, you have to make a lot of art for some of it to be usable.
And you made me think of something that you mentioned a little bit, but I want to drive home, which is, if people become famous news influencers, which is a thing now, which is for one thing, largely not doing original reporting, right? It's largely pointing to other people's original reporting, which is a whole thing because we're losing the entire genre of original reporting. Like, I don't know what happens when we lose completely things like AP and even, yes, Washington Post, New York Times, although New York Times is never going to go away. I actually am very certain of that. Like, they're so diversified in everything they do, they're probably going to be fine. But if everyone's only quoting New York Times investigations, like, I don't know what that news landscape looks like. I mean, it probably just means everyone quoting each other. It's like AI quoting AI quoting AI. But in the world of newsletters and direct to camera news influencing, you're not allowed to make mistakes. And if you do, I think sometimes people, how do I put this? People aren't encouraged to not put something out.
Yeah, this
like
is
the newsletter issue. I'm thinking about the newsletter issue primarily, meaning you just have to publish, even though there are some things that maybe shouldn't see the light of day.
I mean, that's what's so hard is like, one, I think there's tremendous value. Reps are like the only way to get better. And publishing a lot sometimes is that. But also I'm not great at this either. I share every thought that pops into my head. And sometimes that's good. Like the most viral tweets I've ever had have not been my reporting. They've been like jokes about avocado toast. And, I'm like, I guess. I do think there's something in the high-low there that the Beast really taught me and that I still appreciate as sort of part of the things that I do online is not everyone just wants to read about like an investigation involving sexual abuse of minors. Sometimes you need a joke about avocado toast to get through the day. And I actually think I've been thinking a lot lately about how, like the New York Times, they have not solved for how to monetize journalism. They've solved for how to monetize Wordle and cooking app.
Yeah, everything else.
No, they've
Yeah.
monetized. No, they've figured out how to monetize being the New York Times.
Right.
And I think that's what is going to keep them alive. Honestly,
Yeah.
like they're going to do journalism because I don't think it's an ego thing.
Yeah. Well, that's also though, like, that's why you see, I mean, you go to the Texas Monthly, they have a crossword, the Daily Beast, we had a crossword for a while. There's, how to gamify, like how to get people to be sticky on your website. That's a whole thing. But one, this experience at the Barbed Wire has really driven home for me that as much as you want to combine everything into like, I mean, the metaphor we use a lot is instead of having your sort of meat and potatoes journalism, everything is a gummy vitamin so that even the silly stuff has historical context and discussions about race. And even the important stuff has moments of levity and personality. But as much as that's true, and I care about that dynamic, I also think some things are monetizable and some things are less monetizable. And so you're always going to be able to sell ads against beauty and lifestyle in ways that you cannot, liquor, in ways that you cannot with like major investigations into abortion rights. And I think about this a lot too, because we have stories that have done really, really well. They've been on the front page of Apple News. They've gotten like 300,000 views and $0, 0 cents, not a single penny we profit from it. So like, and I felt like that was one of the first mistakes that I was like, of course we have not solved for this. This is the like ever elusive problem in journalism. But I do think we still get kind of stuck on this assumption that if people are reading your work and consuming it and talking about it, that you must be financially stable. And the reality is that that's not true at all. There's literally no correlation.
Oh, wow. You actually gave me a thought.
Oh, good.
Which might be the problem with the 2016 model. I think it's funny you said that because the outlet that I'm thinking of is, I can't get into detail, but they're buying into brands, but not loyalty and not relationship between reader and journalist or reader and publication. Because the most durable form of making money in this day and age is not advertising, which is what virality gets you to. It is, and this is such a smooth segue. I'm so fucking proud of this. It is readers. It is readers believing in what you do and paying for you. Now, maybe there's not enough of them. And I know the struggles that you're having, but you are reader supported and you have incredibly loyal readers.
We do. I mean, I've been amazed. I've done like quarterly pet portraits to help raise money for our journalism. And at one point we just did become a member, and then we expanded it to or donate, even if you're already a member. And there were people who already have a pet portrait from me for one of their dogs who then donated additional money in order to get their second dog have a portrait drawn by me. And that level of loyalty it feels really magical and really lovely, and really special. And also I was thinking about this with some of the numbers on Lena Dunham's book, that she was talking about how Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky followers convert at a much lower percentage to book sales than do Substack or like other newsletter subscribers, which of course, when I say it out loud, makes a ton of sense. People are already reading long form stuff from you. They're going to want the ultimate long form thing from you. But also everything that we've thought about at the Barbed Wire is some way to convert, readers. If you can make your website sticky enough, eventually you can put up a registration gate. Then on, Article 3, you get their email. So even if you only convert like 1.1% of the number of people that read your story, it become newsletter subscribers, become members. The problem with that is that even if you get like really good at doing that conversion, it requires like a 2-year runway. And we never really had a 2-year runway. We had a 6-month runway, and then we had like a runway that never got really beyond that. And then it becomes like, well, how do you invest in email acquisition? Or how do you invest in opening a new vertical that gets like another community of readers interested in you? The fact that everything takes money, I mean, I felt like that was a surprise that I should have seen coming, that I did not.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
Not to be a stereotype or anything, but I am one of those go, go, go girls. So I have so much stuff that's always on my plate. And I always try to grab something on the go after the gym. And it's always so hard to find something that's actually going to be good tasting and good for you, right? Because every time you grab a protein bar that looks like it's going to be okay, you flip it around and you start to read the ingredient list, and it's all sugar, and it's all stuff that you can't even pronounce. All I want is something good to eat. IQ Bar is the better for you plant-based protein snack made with brain-boosting nutrients to refuel, nourish, and satisfy hunger without the sugar crash. IQ Bar has low sugar, low carbs, and it's actually really good. Optimize your mind and body with IQ Bar's clean, functional products like protein bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. Go to IQBar.com today and enter promo code BRAINIQ to get an exclusive offer just for our listeners. 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. That's IQBAR.com, promo code BRAINIQ. IQBar.com, code BRAINIQ.
I have a question. I think it's going to end up being to both of you. And it starts with where we're at now, which is the Barbed Wire being reader supported. I was on the site earlier, and I was looking at something you wrote, which was a thank you to the readers who have supported the site. And it sort of does a lot of things. It tells the story of the site. It's a very personal read. I think it also is, if not directly, sort of asking people to continue to support too, and sort of highlighting how important that is. And I was so struck reading it by the craft that I was taking in just reading this. And what it made me think about was that writers and journalists specifically being in this unique position in these days and times where we're all having to sort of promote, sell, and it's interesting as journalists that you're having to use the same craft that you've been honing your whole career to do this important work with. You're having to use the same craft to sort of reach people in this way. Whereas, I'm a musician, so, I do music in the studio and then I get on social media and I type it. It's hard, but it doesn't feel as, I guess that's the question to me. Like, do you all ever find that difficult to use the same set of tools that you do this important work with to engage with people in this sort of personal way that might feel antithetical to everything you've ever learned about how to be a journalist?
Yeah. I mean, one, I think we could both spend a whole hour talking about just the answer to this question. If you're just listening to this podcast, you did not see the violence with which I nodded my head yes at that. There are some people that I really feel like I've learned from just observing do this. Evan Smith, who was formerly EIC of Texas Monthly and then founded Texas Tribune, is better than I've ever seen anyone at writing the story of his own success. If every time you write a story that has an impact, you have to have a second article that says, look at this impact we had. And then you do that over and over and over again, as well as to hire a full-time grant writer immediately from the very beginning, whose job is just to do that exact thing to individual funders and potential like foundations. A lot of us are not used to doing that, don't realize we have to, try to argue against it. And then, you know, of course, like as you can see in my case, eventually just fine, I'll figure out how to do this. But I can only really do it in the form of a personal essay. And I'll say like, there are a couple versions of that exists. And every single time Kara had to cut like another 2,000 words from it. And still I'm like 4,000 words for a personal essay about what a good year we've had. That's insane. But you know, so I still feel like I'm figuring out how to do it. And I think it did not really sink into me until this year that the version that we write is the record. I knew that sort of intellectually, but it wasn't until I was explaining a student at a university here, one of his professors was guiding him through some reporting and was like, you should go to Olivia Messer. This is kind of her bailiwick. And he came to me and he wasn't very familiar with my work. And I was having this like ego moment of like, what do you mean you haven't read, you know, like I'm going to give you a list of all the stories to find that you should read in order for us to do this reporting. And I typed a question into Google and the like AI thing generated, here are all of the policy impacts Olivia Messer has ever had. And I was like, wow, this is so fun that the written record is pulling from what I've written, my LinkedIn and my website and what's on the Barbed Wire. And it could detail in ways that I wouldn't be able to do off the top of my head. And I was sort of like, this is terrifying. And also really delighted that it hadn't even occurred to me that would be the case, that the version of things we write, even if they don't change anything in the moment, they're still the written record. The fact that there are like politicians who can kind of deny that doesn't change the fact. And I found that really comforting. Anyway, Anna, I really want to hear your answer to this too.
If there was a job I could give to AI, it would be to write my impact and to avoid mentioning Wonkette more than a few times.
This is me and Elizabeth Spires. I'm always like, you founded Gawker. And she's like, I have done so many other things in my career.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe that is all that I did. It's definitely the thing I'm most well known for. I was thinking about this and how I'm going to get emotional. Like, I hate it.
Yeah. Well, you should hire someone to do it for you, is what Evan Smith is really good at.
Yeah, I should.
We've been pretty candid about the fact that our runway is in weeks, not months. It really occurs to me that this may come out after we stop existing or have to close. And we've been riding that tightrope for a while. And the question of like, how much longer can we do it? Also, how long can we do it emotionally? I didn't expect that to be such a thing, but the last week we've been doing all of these great calls with these organizations that I'm so honored that they're even spending time reading our work and talking to us about it. But then at the end of the day, it's almost always actually for this technical reason or another, you're not a short-term candidate for a grant. And there's only so many of those calls you can do before you're like, this feels bad. It hurts. Every single one of them hurts. And pretending that you're not on the edge of a cliff. You know, before I knew more about the business side, I enjoyed not knowing to some degree, but that's not realistic in the long term, because eventually there came a time when you have to make sure that you're taking care of your staff and the people who've invested in you and, you know, your team. And, you know, all of that has been a huge learning opportunity for me as a manager. What do you tell folks? Do you scare them? Are you radically transparent? And then if you are, you know, like I told my team this week, I'm making eye doctor appointments and dentist appointments because we may not have health insurance like 2 months from now. And so then, you know, then one of my team members went to the dentist today and I was like, okay, well, at least we're all taking care of the things we need to take care of.
I guess that transparency probably helps too, given that you know there are people who look to you for support and guidance on how things are going, and the more transparent you can be with them, I'm sure the the better overall. Even if the news you're delivering to them isn't always the best, at least they know where things stand.
Yeah, but then I really have been struggling to balance between being a confident leader who seems to know that things are going to be okay, and one who's like, man, this is the first time that now like someone's thinking about investing in us, and they used to own a company that we're writing about, and then you're like, and this is the exact case that they train you for, of you have to put the journalism and the editorial in, over potential conflicts of interest. But then what does it matter if you are extremely ethically pure but don't exist? Those kinds of questions. I used to think, I mean, I've said this before, but I used to be so righteously indignant earlier in my career. Like, there were times at the Beast where one of my editors used to say that, like, once I was ready to come down from Mount Pius, I could join us in a conversation about headlines. And that's that like AP style training. But it's also just, I don't know, the rigor of doing investigations. I've sort of earned that righteousness, but now that I'm an editor and a manager, I'm like, wow, I was probably a nightmare to manage sometimes.
What do you think you'll bring to a staff position if you have one again? Like what?
Oh, I go like real back and forth.
Not to say that, I mean, Barbed Wire will last forever.
I think I kind of worry after having done freelance and being my own boss, about whether I even would want one again. And certainly right now, the idea of managing people sounds kind of like a nightmare. I would love to just do my own stuff and be responsible for myself and not have a bunch of other people relying on me. And also, the number of ideas that we've had and lessons we've learned, I really hate that you have to make the mistakes to learn the lessons. And I could tell you, I could write, a thesis on what we should have done differently and when we should have done it and why things didn't work out. And I have an understanding of the business side of the newsroom that I never did as a reporter. And I still interact with reporters where I'm like, you have no idea. Like, I just talked to your EIC about how you also have an 8-week runway and you just have no idea. And so, I've had to see the dark, like, unfortunate side of things in a way that I didn't have to before. But, it's also like, there are so many ideas for podcasts and pitches for verticals that I still hope exist somewhere. And I don't know where we'll ever end up with what happens and who owns what and, the IP and all of that. But there's some stuff that I'm like, I've had this idea for 2 years of a like Texas grandmothers give you advice podcast. And like my mom is a real character. And I can see, her and a couple other ladies like doing martinis in the afternoon and giving Gen Z some advice that's amazing and some that's genuinely terrible. And I think that would be really fun. And we have like a whole proposal for what that, kind of thing could look like. And we have that for investigations, for projects, for events, for short form video series. Brian's done such funny stuff. Like, he did this sort of like comedians investigate whether Whataburger's still good story. And we've been talking about like, what would it be like to have him and his friends who are comedians investigate other things like the THC situation in Texas or, like, what is Y'all Street? And, this sort of like comedians investigate series. But we, like, there's something in my head that's like, I want to help place every single one of these ideas, whether it's the Barbed Wire, whether it's somewhere else. I think like we've done this great investigative series on the impact of fracking waste outside of DFW and these kids that have been sick at an elementary school that's built on top of this waste. And I'm like, that there's 20 to 60 million tons of fracking waste in and around DFW, which means that one story is just the first of many. And so I don't know, I guess I think of it less like what would I bring to a staff position and like where can I make sure that all of my writers and reporters and comedians and like really find a way to make sure that they can keep creating stuff, whether it's here or somewhere else.
So we're a podcast primarily here to highlight how creators are navigating these rough economic times. And so one of the most important things that we do is turn the show over to our guests to let people know how they can best support them. So if you got something to plug, and we assume we know what that's going to be, but now is the time.
Thebarbedwire.com. Now that I'm saying this, I'm worried, we have weeks left. But if you can give, that's helpful. We have a little tip jar on our website. $5 is a coffee, $50 is a public record, $500 is a personal essay without the editing included, and $5,000 is one originally reported story.
Do they get to name the story?
That would be fun. You know what? We should do more raffles. And I don't think people do enough raffles today. And then otherwise, I am always going to be offering to draw pet portraits for people. And I do that on Blue Sky, which is a much better place to hang out than X. So feel free to follow me there if you're interested in my career.
You are a good follow. Sometimes there are jokes about avocado toast.
And or as people can find on my Blue Sky, my parents had this very large oil painting of me done that I'm so grateful for, and it also makes me a little uncomfortable. You can see that there as well.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks,
thank
y'all.
you for being here.
All right, Mike.
Plugs. I'm getting on a plane right now, and I'm gonna go to Amsterdam today to start the European tour. It's Amsterdam and Germany and a bunch of places in the UK, and that's what I'm gonna be doing for the next 2 weeks. So if you're in any of those places, take a look out, because I might be coming past your house. You should come see.
I was gonna say, this is a time travel question. By the time people hear this, you will already be doing those dates.
You'll already be in Amsterdam by the time that they hear this.
So my plugs, it's funny, my career actually hit pause this month for reasons a little bit beyond my control. So you know what I'm going to plug? It's not something I make money off of, but I've mentioned before, which is the shootmenintospace.com. I feel like I've had a lot of reasons to sort of think about that site. And
it's really evergreen.
It's evergreen. I really appreciate that I made it. And if you want to support ridiculous projects like that, I do have my own personal Patreon, which is patreon.com/AnnaMarieCox 2, because there is apparently another Anna Marie Cox floating around out there. Mike, have I ever told you there was another Anna Marie Cox in my high school?
No, that's ridiculous. That doesn't even make any sense.
I know. It's very strange. I don't remember if her middle name was Marie, but her name, I think I might have added Marie in order to distinguish myself at that point. I'm trying to think what else.
It would have been a good idea to add a distinctive name part then.
I did add it later in life. Oh, and I also have a YouTube channel where I was going to do the challenge of making a video every day, but then I didn't, but now I am. So people can support me that way.
And follow that journey when it stops and when it starts. Follow
Thank you. Yes. And until next time, Mike.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Past Due is hosted by Anna Marie Cox and Open Mike Eagle. It's produced by Andrew Steven. You can find more at pastduepodcast.com. Help support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/pastdue. You'll get bonus content, extended interviews, and more. As always, if you like what we're doing, another way to help is by subscribing, sharing the show, and leaving us a review. Thanks for listening.
If you've ever Googled a symptom at midnight and convinced yourself something was very wrong, you already know how bad the internet is at health information.
And when you're a freelancer with an on-again, off-again relationship with health coverage, knowing what actually requires a doctor versus what requires a deep breath is not a small thing.
which is why we want to tell you about Health versus Hype from the American Medical Association.
It's hosted by Emmy-nominated science communicator Trace Dominguez, alongside AMA physicians who can actually answer the questions you've been Googling. How much protein do you actually need? What does a sleep score mean? What's the deal with intermittent fasting?
They take it all on and tell you what's real, what's risky, and what's backed by science. Listen to Health versus Hype wherever you get your podcasts.
We all need advice, but it's not always clear who to ask, even in 2026. Enter How To, the long-standing advice show and Ambie Award-nominated Best Personal Growth podcast that's back with new episodes and a new host. Who? Me, Mike Pesca. Each week, I tackle a listener question ranging from travel to finance to relationships and beyond, with help from a world-class expert, someone who actually very much knows what they're talking about. Think of it as eavesdropping on someone else's therapy session without the copay or awkward silences. You've got questions. We'll find the experts and the answers. So follow How To with Mike Pesca wherever you get podcasts.
Have you ever asked yourself, can the president really do that? Or wondered if there was too much money in political campaigns? Then check out the new season of You Might Be Right, hosted by us, former Tennessee governors Phil Bredesen and Bill Haslam.
Well, we're back for a brand new season now, and You Might Be Right cements the idea that constructive disagreement can lead to real problem solving. This season, we're going to dig into the role of the National Guard, AI regulation, and a lot more.
New episodes drop every other week. Follow You Might Be Right wherever you get your podcasts.